Welcome to the meeting of the Rotary Club of South Jacksonville. For our Zoom members, and I know there's one, we are happy that you can join us. Please remember to mute yourself and submit any questions or comments via chat, or unmute yourself and let us hear from you. Do it either way. We thank you to our dual greeters, Eddie Farhat and Martha Barrett, and the prayer and pledge today will be given by Ron Patrick. Welcome, Ron, please.
Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of Rotary and to each other. Bless this food as we nourish our bodies and our minds. May we be ever mindful of those in need. Help us to provide food to the hungry, to heal the wounds of hatred with our love, comfort those in sorrow, and bring peace to those living in areas of unrest. We especially ask your blessing for those living amidst violence in Ukraine. Grant them safety and that they would know not only peace on earth, but your true and unwavering peace. We ask you to grant world leaders the wisdom to see beyond race, religion, and nationality to that common humanity that makes us all of your children. In your holy name we pray.
Amen. Please be seated. And we're back with family time with Christy King. Welcome, Christy.
Thanks, President Richard. Okay, so we have a few weeks to catch up on. We'll start with birthdays. Michelle Kindy celebrated her birthday on March 22nd. Dinkins Grange celebrated his birthday on March 29th. And past President Barry Covington celebrated his birthday on April 2nd. And Tamara Baker celebrated her birthday on April 9th. For wedding anniversaries, Jorge Morales and his wife Margie celebrated their 52nd wedding anniversary on March 21st. Past President and past District Governor Mike Dara and his wife Nancy celebrated their 41st wedding anniversary on March 21st. Rick Morales and his wife Amy celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary on March 24th. And John Cumbo and his wife Amy celebrated their 16th wedding anniversary on March 25th. So for member anniversaries, past President Odette Strauss celebrated 3 years with Rotary on March 26th, but it has been a member for a total of 18 years. And William Harrell celebrated 41 years with Rotary on March 31st. And then that takes care of the last several weeks for the family of Rotary.
Thank you. Some announcements for us this afternoon. The Casino Royale fundraiser announcement. I'm looking at Lisa Marie and she looks like she has an announcement.
Well, I'm really excited that the text worked by the collection that's over there. Yes, thank you very much. Please know that if you missed it or forgot, you'll have another chance. I'm happy to accept any contributions of alcohol and or baskets as we are putting together all of the wonderful items for the silent and live auction. Two things I'd like to recognize. We have the family from Bowles that put together a wonderful basket already for those of us who are assembling baskets. Juliet, thank you to you and Bowles. There's a $450 value in here. So there's a lot of treats in here, but this is just a sample of some of the things that will be available at the auction. We'll decide live, silent. We also, for the live auction, have a threesome. It's actually a foursome, but the threesome get to play with Charlie Cofer at San Jose Country Club. So we have a round of golf at San Jose Country Club. And the other thing that we got this week was it's at the Lip Institute of Golf. It is a swing lab analysis with Dr. Lip. And so he made that contribution as well to the auction. And we will be raffling that off as well. So I'm very excited about all of the stuff that's coming in for the auction. If you have a bottle of liquor or a basket and you did not bring it today, you can bring it next week. Or for those of you who know where the university is and it's in close proximity in your travels, you're more than welcome to drop it off to me and I will accept those things. So, everybody get the video?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
A few folks kind of, yeah, cute. Yes, I'd like to thank Mike Dara and Danny Wampler for their creation of that very creative video. As a reminder to all of us, not only buy tickets, but sell tickets. We have opened up ticket sales to other clubs now and to the public. So other clubs was last week, public is this week. So please make sure that you make your ticket purchase for you and the people that you'd like to enjoy this event with. We're going to have a lot of fun, and I know I'm getting more and more excited as we get closer. So I would like to thank all the committee members who have been contributing so far. We've got several of them in the room with Danny Wampler and Lori Whitmer and Tom Rainey and where am I forgetting? Am I forgetting anybody? Michelle Khalil. So several people that are not with us today, but it takes everybody to make an event like this happen. And I just really thank everybody's energy to pull off this wonderful event. So that's it. Any questions? Danny, you have a question? I can see.
No, just comment, say about, someone brings a gift that's $500.
Oh, for the charitable contributions for the auction, if somebody donates something of value, $500 or greater, then they will also have a ticket to the event to use. So they will get a ticket to attend Casino Royale. Hopefully they'll attend with more than one person, but we are doing that. Lori?
And we need to purchase tickets in advance to ensure you have a spot.
Yes, please. Thank you for pointing that out. So please purchase your tickets in advance. And just to throw it out there, I just want to remind everybody a couple things. From our charities committee, as you can imagine, we haven't really done a lot in the past 2 years, right? So this event is really making up for some lost time, if you will, of time, resources, and other resources, right? So in that effort, we're really trying to make sure that we achieve our goal because all of you know from the charities that we contribute to locally and internationally, what good Rotary does, right? I mean, obviously we've got polio, but we do a lot for our local charities. So the ticket sales, we are limited to 175 people. We want our club members to have the first access to that, right? Purchase your tickets now. But if you're not attending, you don't have to buy the tickets, but you're going to be charged for them. So make no bones about it, but you don't have to purchase them because what we're trying to do is manage the number of people and the number of tickets. Because let's say, for example, that Martha's not attending, right? I know she is, but Martha's not attending. Then we know that we've got another ticket to sell because we're going to sell as many tickets as we can.
I know I will not be attending, unfortunately, but I'd like to have my tickets, so I need to go on and find out, claim those tickets
Yes.
and give them away.
Yes, you can do one of two things. You can let Patty know. Patty, did you hear that? Bob Massey wants to get his tickets. And you can give them away. You can sell them, right? Or, and Patty will bill you, or if you want to go on, we got the QR code and the link, you can actually go out to DACDB, go under the calendar, select the event, and then you'll be taken to the ticket sale page as well. So you can do it either way. But thank you for the question. Any other questions? Thank you, President Richard, for the time. Appreciate it.
Bill Trayer has a Paul Harris moment for us and the Paul Harris book. Where are you?
Right here.
There you are.
I'm appreciative. So just a question, after I've been reading from this book, how many people were like me that thought Paul Harris was a guy that graduated from college, went to law school, had a law practice, and then started Rotary? Just like an ordinary businessman. Yeah, it's kind of changed my opinion a lot of it too. So
Made me question a lot, actually.
he was an adventurer, and that's the conclusion I've come. So we left, we went through this California, he graduates from law school, for those of you that aren't here, graduates from law school, winds up going to California, works as a reporter, winds up wandering around the state, packs fruit, winds up going to Southern California, where he winds up teaching college for a while. And then he decides, I want to go to Denver. So he takes off for Denver. And when he gets there, because he had a brief opportunity to actually be a reporter in San Francisco, he applies for a job at the Rocky Mountain News. And he actually would get a salary there. During one of his assignments, he met a bunch of cowpokes driving a herd of cattle across Colorado. Knowing what you know about him now, what do you think probably happened? That's right, he left his job and he becomes a cowpoke. He convinces the boss of his proficiency as a cowpuncher. Perhaps he failed mentioning his expertise was based on the management of 2 milk animals in the pastures of Vermont. And he also, while he was working in Denver prior to this, he became an actor. He worked as an actor, and apparently the theater he worked at was one of somewhat ill repute. We won't go into that. So he winds up riding the range alone for a while, searching for cattle. He soon realized that reading about being a cowboy was easier than living as one. The men he worked with were tough, weathered individuals whose language was as colorful as any he'd heard back east. The only difference was many of them mixed Spanish phrases in there. Being no slouch at this questionable art, Paul introduced these hard men to his brand of New England cussing, thereby expanding their vocabulary while improving his own. So he finished his desire to be a hardworking cowboy, goes back to Denver, once again sought employment with the newspaper, this time the Denver Republican, where he starts to work there. As the snows begin falling and the weather turns cold, this is 1892, he met some former San Francisco newspaper friends who were going to Florida. So he quits his job. He's still got some savings left. And he boards a train and strikes out for Jacksonville. Exactly. This is where he first winds up here. At about the same time, his family, remember his granddad, who was raised by, passed away. And that's how he's able to fund some of this. He got some inheritance. But his dad, George, also had some inheritance, and he winds up living the good life. Ultimately, winds up with a child that wasn't by his wife. They split up, and George moves to Denver, which Denver is going to continue to play a part in his life. But for now, I'm going to leave you with this because I want to get into what happens at the St. James Hotel and everything in Jacksonville where he's living. For now, he's going to stay in the Sunshine State. Until next week.
You left us breathlessly awaiting the next episode.
Reminds me of reading the bedtime story I used to read to my kids, when they were sick. And no, we're going to put it away and read the rest now.
I'd like to let you know, if you haven't looked online already, that Rotary support for the victims of the war in Ukraine is continuing. Latest totals, $20,000 in cash donations into the York Foundation, and has been sent to Rotary in Warsaw, Poland. In addition, the Rotary Foundation Ukraine Disaster Relief Program has raised $74,000. Astonishingly, body armor has been donated by the Rotarians in Gainesville Sunrise and has already been delivered and is in use. There is a 747 cargo plane that will be loading medical supplies in Jacksonville until the 7th of this month, and they are looking for huge donations of medical supplies. Very interesting and absolutely wonderful. To introduce visitors and guests today, Eddie Farhat.
All right. Do you have any visitors today? Well, I know we have some guests. Just want to see if any from other clubs. So first up, Tom, you have a visitor?
I do. Thank you, Eddie.
With me today, I have a great friend. This is Jennifer Mack. She is not only a commercial insurance agent, she makes commercial insurance exciting. Her first experience to Rotary, please welcome Jennifer Mack.
All right, Jason Burnett, you have a few guests.
I have a terrible friend. I just like to contract. Jeff Bridge, please stand, Jeff. He's a terrible friend because he quit my law firm and went out and practiced on his own. He's also with Watson Realty now. He is a real estate lawyer and a broker. So Jeff Bridge. And also on the other side, in case Jeff finds a house to sell, we have Michael Hodling with Moody and Associates, who is an appraiser who's been visiting with us several times.
All right, and Bill Langley, you have one guest.
I'm playing the role of Bill Langley today. And I had the good fortune of sitting next to Katie Bowling, who I've known for a good while, and our mothers are very good friends. And Katie works with the Jacksonville Children's Chorus in the position of
business manager and development officer and choreographer, but it doesn't all fit on me.
Please welcome Katie.
You ready?
Oh, okay.
Julie, you have one guest. Sorry about that. False alarm.
Hi, everyone. This is Brian Corrigan. Brian is the communication director of the Duval County Board of Reports, and he's also married to Sarah Corrigan, who is past president of our Rotary Club.
Welcome, everyone. All right, now we have a song for you.
We here in Rotary welcome you today. So glad you came along, glad you came our way. Our hand of fellowship is yours, sunshine or in rain. We here in Rotary say welcome, come again.
And now to introduce our guest for the day, as, whoop, more. Oh, what's wrong with me? Okay. I did this one other time too, I remember. Okay. Go. Want to come up?
Yeah,
Yeah.
50-50. Sorry, I wanted to do that before the guest speakers.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
All right, we have 44 tickets left, and there's $650 in the pot. Huh? 44 what?
Cards.
She's never played cards. She calls
I meant cards, yes, thank you. Cards.
She was thinking of the fundraiser.
Yeah, there you go.
I think so. All right, 091191. Oh. All right, 43.
Close, very close.
Sorry for the interruption.
No.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else involving games of chance and money that I've forgotten today? Maybe not. Okay. So our program introduction is courtesy of past president Marlon Boss. Marlon.
Well, John, I'm Harlan. And I'm coming off the bench and totally unprepared. So,
Keep it short, keep it short.
You can do it, Harlan, you can do it.
Don is the CEO of Firehouse Subs. Don, you've been there about, you've been there about 10 years.
Actually 19.
Wow. And I know some of you guys know former Rotarian Stephen Jost, who was one of the, I guess he was one of the founders with the Sorensen brothers. And I think they had a great sandwich. They had a great concept. They had a great
experience, and then they realized when they wanted to get into growing this thing a little more, to franchise it, they needed to bring in a professional, and I think that's probably when they reached out to Don. If anybody else wants to give me any other, so that I can warm up our speaker, but I don't think that he needs much more. John Fox, please welcome.
Well, I'm going to make one commitment, which is I'm going to weave Denver in just as much as I can. Well, my gosh, first of all, it is great to be back out in recent weeks or the last few months, back out on the road a bit, traveling, being in front of people. Boy, I think it's fair to say we all miss this sort of thing over most of the last 2 years. So can't think of a better place to be today than really in front of all of you. I've got some prepared remarks, if you will, in company of the slides I put up. Some of you, if you heard me speak before, may see some familiar material. If you hear me repeating anything you heard before, forgive me. I apologize. I'm going to move through some of the prepared things fairly quickly because what's on here doesn't talk a lot about the last 2 years, doesn't talk at all about the big event for Firehouse and for all the members of the team, which has to do with the sale of the company. Took place in December. I imagine a lot of you might have questions about that. It was a fascinating experience to go through as a CEO and help me navigate through it. So I'm going to do something a little different than I usually do. I'm going to leave a bunch of time for questions, really, because I'd rather talk about things you might be curious about. But let me start by discussing what I call our formula for success. You know, what it took to get this brand over the course of 27 years to the point where it could be sold for $1 billion. I always want to do my Austin Powers, but it's a big number. And I think it's fair to say, if I'm no longer speaking for the Sorensens, but if I were, I'd say they're very proud to be Jacksonville born and raised, be able to grow a brand, a world-class brand like this, and have it be so intricately linked to the community that they grew up in, and with a commitment to keep the brand headquartered here. That was a very important part of the transaction for them as they worked to find the right suitor, the right buyer for the company, and now in the form of Restaurant Brands International. I'll talk more about that later as a parent company. The transaction came with commitment to keep the brand here. You know, very important is we have field-based employees, but the vast majority of people to support the franchise system are right here in Jacksonville. So what has it taken to get us to where we are? And let's see, there we go. It seems like this chart's very interesting. This is the development history or the timeline for growing restaurants. So it ends at the end of 2021. We finished last year with 1,213 restaurants. But it started as, well, if you go back to the beginning, and all stories do start at the beginning, except for Star Wars. Star Wars starts in the middle, but I won't go there. But this started back in October of 1994. Robin and Chris, and many of you may know it, that first restaurant in Mandarin, San Jose Boulevard, in the shopping center now, where the Five Guys is. It's a few doors down from there. The old Tag and Title office used to be on the corner. We since many years ago now we moved it over to the out parcel on the end cap by the Outback Steakhouse. So we still call that the mothership. Restaurant number one still carries that distinction. But that's all where it started. I think it's fair to say when Rob and Chris and Stephen joined him from the outset. You may have heard the story, basically for free sandwiches. We go and do the books for him. Well, that turned out to be a great deal in the end, but he was right there with them from the outset. And when they opened that first unit, I think it's fair to say they could not have imagined what ended up happening. They did get into franchising very early, as early as 1995, because people went into that first restaurant, just family-owned business. They had one paid employee, everybody else was family members at the outset. But people came in, had a great experience. The food, then it's just like it was today. If you had a hook and ladder back then, the only real difference was the bread they got from a different supplier. And I would say the bread's better now than it was back then. So it's only been improved upon. But people came in, had that experience in a little bit rawer form, the memorabilia, the firefighting decor, of course, that's an important part of the heritage. A little more basic back then. But people came in and based on that experience, wanted to get involved. They wanted to either invest or franchise based on the merits of the experience. The branding, I'll talk more about branding in a moment, because this would really apply for any business. I think any independent starting out, if you don't have aspirations to grow into $1 billion enterprise, thinking about branding is critical. No matter what it is that you do, no matter what you sell, no matter what service you provide. Branding at its heart is a way to have ownership of the particular attributes, the unique things about your business, even if it's a fairly pedestrian product that you're selling. But you've got to find a point of differentiation to stand out. And when you find that point of differentiation, it's branding it that makes it uniquely your own, that creates linkage with those attributes and your identity as a company. So they're very smart about that, and that manifested itself in people wanting to franchise. And then they did something pretty foolish. They ran out and they sold franchises because they weren't equipped to sell franchises. They really had no business getting into the business of franchising. But they learned very quickly. That was one thing they were very smart about. If they made a mistake, they realized it early, caught it, corrected. And they went about the business of getting those first couple franchises back pretty early. So by about 1997, 98, they had the first couple of restaurants that opened up back under their control. And then they focused all on company development operations in the first few years. And it was in 1998, relatively short time after, but they got out of franchising, got back into it a little bit. Some of you may know the name Kelly Harris. Right now, Kelly used to be a partner with them, joined them in 1996. Came from the old Quincy's Steakhouse chain. If you remember Quincy's, this was a market for them, long defunct. And at that point, Quincy's was on its way down. And Kelly bailed out of that system looking for his next best thing. Was a common theme. Loved Firehouse as a customer, wanted to get involved in some way. They couldn't hire him, even though they really knew they could use somebody with professional restaurant experience to help them out. So they gave him an opportunity to invest with them. And he exited and sold his interest quite a few years ago. But at the time, that was pretty important because he brought in some professional experience and then brought in people that became some of the, then I would call the first real franchisees in the system. And they got into franchising more seriously in 1999, 2000, started picking up some momentum. They used another very smart move that a lot of entrepreneurs and founders don't exercise. They enlisted the help of a consultant in 2000 and 2001. A great guy in the world of franchising. If you're in that arena, you might benefit from his name, Michael Sy. He co-wrote the book Franchising for Dummies with the late Dave Thomas. Great book, especially if you want to see both franchisor or franchisee perspective. And that consultant and some other subcontractors they brought in specialty areas worked with the ownership team for a better part of a year to come up with go-forward strategy. And that was when the decision was made to use franchising as the primary vehicle, but with a commitment to keep company restaurants at the same time, but limit the company restaurants. Because there at one point we owned restaurants out in Arkansas and down in South Florida. They divested themselves of those and just focused on Jacksonville, the home market where they get a better control of it. And very important, because I think if you're franchising, you should know your business that you're offering to people to sell. You should be expert at it, just as you expect your franchisees to be. And then I always point, I don't know if this has this laser doesn't work here. I always point out, that's when I came to Firehouse, and see what happened after that. That was alluded to. That was actually, I joined in 2003, and it was to head up that young franchising side of the business at that point. And there were 65 restaurants when I arrived. 30 of them were franchised, 35 were company owned. They still have some of those, in those other areas that I mentioned. Kelly, who had been in the system, didn't have franchising experience. That part of it didn't really, didn't have any experience working with franchise systems. Quincy's was a company-owned network. So I came into that role. Just a little bit about myself too. I've been, oh my gosh, 48 years in the restaurant business now altogether. I started out washing dishes, a little Italian restaurant in Lakewood, New Jersey. Quickly discovered that your best friend when you're a dishwasher, especially in an Italian restaurant, your best friend is whoever is stirring the sauce pot. So if any of you ever wash dishes, you know what I'm talking about. You get left with all the carbon buildup, everything on the end. And the only thing that stops that is whoever is keeping that sauce moving all night. So make friends with that person. They are your buddy. You want to get out of him. Well, first most valuable lesson. By the way, my first big promotion, talking about aspirations, by the way, is no different today. Things that we were talking earlier about youth and everything else, it's no different today. People are, youth are just motivated the same way. I was talking to a class over at University of North Florida, and actually I told this story about my first job in dishwasher, how that was the most important thing. And the most important career aspiration I had as a dishwasher, working my tail off. My most important aspiration was about 6 feet, 90 degrees to my left, and it was the salad station. And gosh darn it, if I wanted to get off that dish sink, slaving away for 8 hours, I had to earn my way over to making salads, toasted bread. And that was the most important thing that could have happened in my life at that point. But there was one thing that was going to get me there. I'd be the best damn dishwasher that there was. And every moment that I had, I'd turn around and I would watch what was happening on that salad station. I wasn't going to wait to be trained. I'd go talk to the person. I'd watch what was going on. I'd watch the stuff that was coming down the plates that I had to clean. And what was most so gratifying, I'm out at UNF, speaking to a class there, and I tell that story. This young woman from Germany comes up. So she's exchange student coming in. She goes, I can't tell you how meaningful that was to me, because my first job, she's very young, so it's maybe her last job, washing dishes. And I can't tell you how much that was my life that I'm just living just a couple of years ago. That's great. You know, so somebody motivated and hardworking, believe me, they're out there. I'm an optimist by nature, and I still think most youth are the same. People haven't changed that much. We're all still pretty much wired the same way. We need great leadership. Maybe that's what's lacking. I'm getting ahead of my presentation a little bit. Maybe the one biggest opportunity there is today is maybe in some of our generation, learning to, or forgetting sometimes, how to be great leaders and be inspirational and so on. That burden's on us. The burden's always on us to do it, not other people down there. We got to motivate them. That's our challenge. So I've done a lot of motivating over the years to get to this point, because all that happens to get to over 1,200 restaurants is through people. You know, it takes three things to really build a brand like this. It takes time. Time's finite. We all have it, the same amount. So how do you use it? Right? How we use each minute, each hour, each day, each year. Second asset it takes is money, capital in its various forms to come in. It really doesn't discriminate that much. It's not as much always about where you get it, it's how you spend it. You invest it wisely, you put it in the right things. And the third resource, and it's the most critical of the three, is the people. Because all the time and all the money in the world, in most businesses, does not get you to the finish line. It's people that get you to the finish line. You know, the Sorensens don't get to a $1 billion sale without a hell of a lot of people. It's not them. It's people. It's not me singularly. And you can do your part. I'm a big fan of servant leadership. You know, people aren't there to serve me. They're not working for me. If anything, I'm working for them. I'm working towards their success. That ultimately is what's going to lead to everybody, to your individual success or the business owner's success. But it's serving those people who you, by the way, expect in turn to serve your customers. And they've got to look at it that way. Every employee has to look at it in that sense. Even the duck agrees. So here's what we look like on a map today. Now 1,222 locations. We've opened up 9 units so far this year. The pandemic's had challenges for that, but very successful business up in Canada, down in Puerto Rico. We've been in Puerto Rico a lot of years. Great bit of karma there is Restaurant Brands International also owns Burger King, and our franchisee in Puerto Rico is a major Burger King franchisee. They have 170 restaurants in Burger King. So we started right off the bat with a co-brand, if you will, operator experience. By the way, and another unique thing I didn't mention this before, I did say 48 years in the restaurant business, but 23 years were with Burger King. I'll come back to it later in terms of what I found out who was going to be buying Firehouse. That was a pretty interesting moment. I talked about branding, so I'll just build on a couple of things I mentioned. For Firehouse in particular, there's really 3 main elements for a brand. And I would encourage you about your own businesses, think about your brand. You have a brand. Sometimes people just don't know what it is, but you have a brand.
So what are those defining things, though? You should understand them. You should be able to articulate them in terms of what makes you special and different and how you differentiate it in your brand. The three elements for us, one is the image, and the image is just not the physical appearance of the units. We have points of distinction in ours, the memorabilia. And what you see here is, this is our older image, what we call our legacy image. This is a brand new design. We have a couple of these in town, one in Durban. If you've been down to Durban Town Center, is a new image. We're still experimenting with some things there. One up in the Yulee exit, Wild Light up there is a new image. So around the country, we'll be building more of the things on the left. But the critical part of the image is people. You know, it's a service experience that you have. I always hold Chick-fil-A in great esteem. You know, if I can say 2 words that will embody their image, and I bet you can say them before. That's it. They take those 2 words and talk about branding. It's not why they started that way. You know, Truett Cathy, the founder, he was dead because of great service. And he actually took the idea from Ritz-Carlton. Really embodied that. And people, if you know the history of Ritz-Carlton, you'd be familiar with that. They preceded Chick-fil-A with them baking that into their service culture. But who gets to, not for inventing the phrase, but as far as tying to their business, Chick-fil-A without doubt. I can't help but, and anytime I'm out anywhere, if somebody says my pleasure to me, I can't not help but think of Chick-fil-A. What is that? Am I alone in that? Probably not. So great story in terms of tying service to image and to the brand. And then our food, we're very differentiated. The Sorensens, that's one of the things that they deserve 100% of the credit. They're all their recipes, flavor profiles. They were the guardians of it for all these years. As the years moved on and they were farther and farther removed from the business, that was the one element more than any that they really were tied to, Robin in particular. So up until the sale of the company, there wasn't a product that ever went on sale in the restaurant that didn't get their personal stamp of approval. I added culinary chef, sophisticated R&D team over the years, but still all that work never got released until they got there. Okay, they ended up being then involved more on the back end of it, as opposed to in the early years. They were all fronted from beginning to end. And we branded it. The hook and ladder is our Whopper. It's a ham and turkey sandwich. It's, what's the big deal about a ham and turkey sandwich? Everybody's got a ham and turkey sandwich if you're in the restaurant business. But it's the unique things about hook and ladder. It's the steaming process. It's the whole muscle proteins. It's our bread recipe. All the things tie it together and make it such a phenomenal sandwich. It's our #1 selling sandwich. It's not a stretch to say it's the best sandwich in America, right? Because we get the highest ratings for food quality not just in some years, not just the sandwich category, but in the entire industry. I mean, in 2015, we were #1 in the entire industry. Bruce Chris down the hall was #2. That's not to say that if you put a New York strip next to them, but in terms of the ratings we get from our customers on our food and the ratings they get from their customers on their food, we score higher. We get a higher top box rating, and research is critical. We got that year, I think we had 79% of people saying excellent, 5 on a 5-point scale for our food in general. And so hook and ladder is our #1 selling sandwich. So by extension, I'll claim by extension that is the best sandwich in America. And then another very important part of our branding, and again, this is like the Chick-fil-A thing, not by design, but it is the heart of Firehouse. It's what we do through our charity, through the Firehouse Public Safety Foundation. And Jacksonville in particular has been a huge beneficiary in terms of the population here, in terms of the millions of dollars donated back into the First Coast area. And I'm always thankful for our customers, because about 70% of the money that goes to fulfill grants to first responders is from our customers, mostly through rounding up at the transaction. That's the major thing. Dropping coins or cash into the coin canister is some, but the vast majority is through that roundup. And then selling the pickle buckets, sell the empty pickle buckets, no charge for the pickle smell. That's free. But $3 now for a high quality 5-gallon bucket that otherwise ends up in the trash. So great recycling
and green initiative. I love this particular picture, and we share the story behind this to all of our team members. That Jaws of Life, it's a hydraulic extrication tool. Very popular donation item, especially these days. People, the fire departments want the battery operated type that they can carry out in the field, as opposed to the typical one, which is pneumatic air pumps that are having to drive lines from generators. Really tough to get to accident scenes where you've had cars that left the road, rolling down a ditch or something. Very difficult to get to them with conventional equipment. So very popular donation piece. And that is a real scene that Jaws of Life was put to use for the first time at that accident, and it had been donated. It had been given to that fire department the day before. And in the car were two young men, and they were both employees of a local firehouse. I kind of get choked up every time I tell the story. And we keep that story very top of mind with our teams, our franchise teams all across the country, because the success of the fundraising through the restaurants is really dependent upon that 16-year-old, like the kid we're talking about, being connected enough with the brand and the purpose to ask the customer, hey, would you like to round up for the Firehouse Public Safety Foundation? The difference between them just asking that question or not, it's all the difference, because without that question, most customers aren't aware or not motivated to go ahead and make that donation. Could be 10 cents, could be 99 cents, whatever it is. But boy, does it add up. I mean, a typical year now, we will raise about, this year we'll probably raise about $11 to $12 million through the restaurants. We've donated now about $68 million in equipment over the life of the foundation. So who knows how many lives that say we don't count them, but we know every time a piece of equipment is donated, that's going to save one or more people in its time in service. One of our advertising agency once, as we were vetting an advertising agency, our current agency, which is the Richards Group, which was Chick-fil-A's agency for many, many years, invented the cows, and get a lot of credit for that. They asked us a very poignant question. They said, hey, if Firehouse Subs just disappears, if it falls off the face of the earth, what difference does it make? I said, well, what the difference it will make is there will be lives that aren't saved. Because with it, if there's no foundation, there's no capacity to do that, that's what the difference would be. Because anybody can get a sandwich anywhere. Not as good as ours. but that's the real difference. And yeah, that's what motivates us. Everybody on my team, more than anything else. Every time we open up another restaurant, we know now we're in a new community, and that means a chance to raise money and make donations in that community. And we know that's going to make the biggest difference. Just one other note on branding. Here's great brands that failed. Quiznos maybe not so great, but I use them as an example. If some of you may, we've got varying ages in the room, but the real best story about the biggest restaurant brand that ever failed is Howard Johnson's. But a lot of you are too young, you wouldn't remember Howard Johnson. At one point, they were bigger than McDonald's, even into the 70s, they were larger than McDonald's.
Oh, Joe's.
Yes, yep. But think about these. These were dominant #1 brands. I mean, Kodak had 90% share in film at one point. And they should be king of the hill in all things digital imaging, or where are they? So branding isn't everything. Sears, they should be Amazon. If you've been around long enough, what were they? One of the things they were most famous for was their catalog. I remember as a kid, I think it came out every 3 months. As a kid, me and my brother and my sisters, believe it or not, we were kind of a modest income family. It was like salivating, looking through the toy section, or when you got the Christmas catalog to look through. Right? We used to, in fact, I was just telling the story to somebody else. We used to, if you have limited means, we would play cutouts in the catalog, cut the figures out. But Sears should have been Amazon. They were in mail order. I mean, that's what they were doing fulfillment. I mean, where are they? Blockbuster, they should be Netflix. I can go on and on. Quiznos, it's more contemporary, but there you have a brand, not in the lead, those on the leads, but over 5,000 restaurants. And they're down to about 220. So the biggest brands. So success isn't just having a great brand in and of itself. It rests in doing other things. And, for us, and I've talked about these elements, it's the culture. I've got to make sure as CEO, my main role is to make sure that the culture of Firehouse, of this great brand, is lived and breathed every day through our franchise community, through the employees. For the sake of time, I'm gonna go through this really quick. There's the 3 elements to that culture. One is our mission statement. If you don't have a mission statement, get one. Put it together and make sure it's meaningful and people believe in it. It's repeatable. Ours is to carry on our commitment to and passion for hearty and flavorful food, heartfelt service, and public safety. Those 3 things we drive to be #1 at in the entire restaurant industry, and don't settle for anything less than that. If we're not achieving that, then what do we got to do to achieve it? Second thing, values. You want to align yourself. Everybody on your team, your employees, your vendors, align yourself on value systems, because when the going gets tough, I always equate this to a marriage. A marriage between 2 people, when you'll have tough times. By the way, you can have a really successful marriage between 2 people who have different hobbies, interests, not identical carbon copy of each other, and they have great marriages. But if you don't share values, then when times get tough, it is the absence of shared values that won't make it work. That's when it's going to go downhill. So shared values are critical. In fact, I think in a perfect world, you'd like to share values with all your customers too, but that's not the way commerce works. You don't pick and choose. But never forget this. Your customers pick you based on values. You don't get to pick your customers based on it. Your customers pick you. Chick-fil-A, I'll go back to as an example of that. And not everybody, not every customer, but there's some of their customers that really reward them for the fact that they're a faith-based business. Reward them for the fact that they close on Sundays, so they live their principles. They respect that, and they reward them for it with their business. By the way, they still go out and eat somewhere else on Sunday. So they're not harboring malice against everybody that wants to be open, but they reward Chick-fil-A for their commitment. And then the third thing is, in all your businesses, I'm not going to go through these, but this serves as an illustration. For me as a franchisor, my side of the business, there are fundamental things that we need to do well, blocking and tackling. So you got the cultural, you got the aspirational thing, the higher altitude. But in the end, what are the things that you functionally have to do right? They don't have to do with the brand, but the tactical things you have to do. And in our system, we show the same thing to the franchisee, because they have their own business. In franchising, anybody here involved in a franchise system at all? No. I'll just brief it. In a franchise system, there are 2 unique businesses. Things I am responsible for as a franchisor, things the franchisee is responsible for. We have common interests that overlap, but there are distinct things we're separately responsible for, and that's why I make sure to differentiate these, and is what the franchisee has to do. So I want to I hit on a couple of these things before I turn to some questions. As CEO, I've been actually CEO since 2009. I joined in 2003, became Chief Operating Officer in 2005, and then CEO in 2009. And it's incumbent upon the CEO to bring leadership to the organization, servant leadership, is the way I like to express it. But there are many books about leadership, by the way, we all learn, I think, as we go through. Are there natural born leaders? I don't know. I kind of doubt that sometimes. I don't think there so much is such a thing. I think some people have some stronger traits, but I think a lot of it is what you learn along the way, sometimes by trial and error, sometimes through more formal means. But I would also say that I'm a believer in situational leadership. Leadership, if you've been in the military, I've written 2 books, World War II history, unit history of the 4th Armored Division. It's a longstanding passion of mine. One of the greatest privileges of my life is getting to know so well so many World War II veterans. First book was published back in 2003, and the second one just back in 2020. I didn't serve in the military myself, but through them and my research and authorship, learned so much. And going back to when I met the first ones in 1999, and boy, you can bet that's carried through into my own leadership role experience. But the point I want to make is situational leadership. It's just that when you're in the military, and if you any people who have served here, no. So especially if you served in combat, boy, there are demands on leadership that are much different than when you're making sandwiches. And the way you have to, and the things you have to exude and take with authority and take command, if you will, in a life and death situation in a different way. But the gravity of that aside, one of the things that I think are important, at least in the type of situations I manage, that I lead in, one is leading by example, critical. You got to walk the talk. I always remind people, young leaders in my organization, never forget that the capacity of the people that you lead to watch you is far greater than your capacity to watch them. Because I can guarantee you, everything you do is being watched by someone that you lead. At some point, you are not watching it every turn, everything that everybody does that you lead. And remember that everything you do is seen and judged and plays into your effectiveness for that group. And it can be in the smallest of things. You know, for just one example, we have a meal benefit in Firehouse. And employees actually, if you're a restaurant employee, you get half price off. If you're the manager, you get a free meal. There was for many, many years, there was if you were a headquarters employee at certain levels, you got a benefit of a discount or a free meal. When I go into one of our restaurants, I never get a free meal or a discount. I am the last person that needs a free meal or a discount. And especially if out of necessity, perhaps financial necessity, the hourly employees are only getting a 50% discount. I don't need that. I want to show the respect for the work they do, how hard they're working, trying to meet their budgets and so on. I'm going to pay a full ride for that meal. I'm going to contribute to their success, not somehow take away from it. And by the way, when I go into the restaurant, there isn't a single customer that I'm ever going to allow to get in line in front of me. What signal does it send to the employees working far harder on any given day than I do? Truth be known. If you want to talk about hard work, go back to scrubbing dishes, go back to slinging sandwiches all day, being on your feet for 10 hours. That's hard work, right? No, every customer that walks in is going to get in line in front of me, and I will wait my turn in the back because I want to send a signal to those employees that those customers are more important than I am. I'm not going to stand in the way of them and then another customer get their order. So all the things like this, remember, all those things are seen and they're observed. You don't talk about them, I just do them. But if I know what's thought about it, because that ends up getting played back to me later. So lead by example in all things. Second thing, this comes from my military background, mission style orders. I don't micromanage, don't over trust your people. That comes with great training, by the way. You can only really lead with mission style orders if you know that people are prepared, that they're extraordinarily well trained and equipped to operate within those guardrails that you might be setting with a mission style order. And but they know what the mission is, they know what the objective is, you've equipped them with the right tools, with the right training to be able to go do it. That's a great recipe. Accountability is important. I'm servant leadership and everything else, but boy, better have accountability on your team. And I don't mean heavy-handed, but fair. That's one of our values. Fair accountability, because as I think you all may have experienced in your lives, you're all successful sitting in here today, but I bet you every one of you at some point in time has been on a team where you've worked with people that haven't pulled their weight. It becomes very frustrating for you. And what eventually happens if leadership or ownership is not holding people accountable, then the good people leave because they're tired of pulling more than their fair share through the whole thing. So it takes fair accountability to achieve that. And then optimism. I think every culture, every business, every enterprise has a choice between one and two extremes, optimistic or pessimistic. Which is going to be better? Which would you choose? Given a choice, which would you take? You'd have an optimistic culture in your business. Far better results. Sometimes easier said than done to get there, but it is a choice, I think, for everybody at the end of the day. And then there's, LMAO. Yes. No coincidence. But it comes hand in hand with the last part, which is to have fun. Have fun at what you do. It's so important. Yes, that is Shaquille O'Neal. He has a very big hand. It was a little uncomfortable being over his lap. But you got to be a little self-deprecating. You gotta have fun, and your people see that, it leads to a great atmosphere. So I am going to finish, and that is my last slide. Good time. So we can, if we have time, happy to take any questions. But yes.
What is Restaurant Brands International allowing Firehouse to do that it hasn't been able to do under the ownership under these orders?
For several things. One is opening the door for international expansion and bringing all the resources that it takes and the expertise that it takes to do it. Because candidly, even though we've operated in Canada, even in my years of Burger King, didn't have a lot of, well, no development experience internationally. And I don't really have anybody on the team that has much at all. So they bring that to the table. And research, analytics tools, I've invested there, but they've got a whole, to give you some context. So for the first time last year, we did over $1 billion in sales. We did 1.1 billion in sales for franchise. And Restaurant Brands International, before we got there, or last year, did 35 billion in sales. So we were quite proud of the fact internally that we finally did $1 billion. It's a long goal of mine to build into $1 billion revenue system sales company. And we celebrated that for about 20 minutes. I said, now we're 1/35th of. So we're then looking forward to a lot of added resources. Yeah. Oh, yes. And no. Yeah. Go ahead.
A couple of years ago, I heard the longtime marketing director for Chick-fil-A. I'm trying to think of his name, but he's written a book and he goes on speaking tour. So he talked about what they did. And I was struck by a period of time, he said in the mid-'80s, they weren't growing like they wanted to. So they just took a couple of years and they did all kinds of surveys of their customers. But it took a couple of years because they weren't worried about the profits because they're closely held. Mm-hmm. So what struck me about that is they could do that because they're closely held. Because if you're a public company, you're driven about the next quarter's earnings and all that. What's going to happen with you guys? I just wondered, is that, you don't have that freedom anymore.
Yeah, well, and time will tell. But in the early going, one thing that is, I think, different in this transaction compared to a lot of transactions that happened over any number of years in the restaurant industry is the growth story that we carried into it. So unlike other deals where it's a distress thing or there's all different motivations. In our case, because we're doing so well. So the operating model, if you will, coming in is, all right, Don, what do you need? Let's keep doing what you're doing. See what resources we can bring to bear on it. We'll open up this whole door for international. And they manage that in a very, bless you. They manage that in a very unique way in terms of how they structure the company. So my primary responsibility is all North America operations. We'll assist the international thing, but it's really under their own management devices to bring it to other areas. So at this juncture early on, so no changes in the product quality, only those that we would make on our own merits. So no pressure to cut costs, which again probably isn't typical, but so far so good. I'm very optimistic. I always tell people, if you're curious, just come on, keep coming in and trying it. And then let me know if it's not on. Yes.
One more.
Yep.
Don, I'm assuming it's important for the Sorensens to find a buyer that would allow Firehouse to continue to commute service in public safety. Support.
It was a critical part of it. It was, and as Rob and Chris decided to sell, and Stephen and a couple of our minority small partners in the business, they didn't have to. Always be careful. I'm not their official spokesman, but just to be candid, they didn't have to. There wasn't a compelling reason. It's a matter of the timing. They weren't preparing. Obviously, now I'm saying that they weren't preparing any of the kids. It wasn't going to be a Chick-fil-A story. It wasn't going to be a second generation, obviously. So I mean, something has to happen. It's just a matter. It's not if. It's just when, under what circumstances. And the way things. We had I didn't have time to talk about it. I'm sorry, I should have left more time, but it's just an unbelievable story through the pandemic. We only had negative sales for 10 weeks. for 10 weeks. By mid-May of 2020, we were beating the prior year sales. We've had record sales ever since. Like
So you could do takeout.
22% sales.
You could do takeout.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And but we held on. So actually, it was actually last year. So in 2021 was the explosive years. We grew sales 22% in 2021, on top of then the success we had in 2020. So it's been something, but it's very important to Sorensen's and the foundation. They are the one area that Rob and Chris are remaining involved in, because they're completely divested of the company, but they're remaining on it in the nonprofit role. So they're remaining, they're in service on the board of directors for the 501c3. So very, very important to them they continue that. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody.
I'd like to give you the certificate as a reminder that we have made a small donation in your honor to the Rotary Foundation for the eradication of polio.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it. For the work you're doing on with the Ukraine situation, that wasn't lost on me when you mentioned that. I appreciate it.
Very well. Next week, our speaker will be Jim Overton, Duval County Tax Collector. As we end our meeting, we close with our membership motto, each one bring one, and our Rotary motto.
Service above self, one heart, to those who serve best.
Always